Okay, 1 Corinthians 13, I hope that you're there. You know, so many people go to 1 Corinthians 13, they read this chapter about love, and they're completely unaware of the context in which it resides. Chapters 12, 13, and 14 of 1 Corinthians are dealing with miraculous spiritual gifts. Chapter 13 is right there, in the middle. Now, I know someone might say, wait, miraculous spiritual gifts? Well, actually, as you look at these first three verses, I do believe he's referencing them there. And then as you get down to the last paragraph of the chapter, once again, the discussion turns more back to miraculous spiritual gifts. So how does love fit in a context of miraculous spiritual gifts? Much about unity has been written in 1 Corinthians. How to have unity been written, 1 Corinthians. And as you get to chapter 12 and you read of these diversities of gifts, and then he talks about, the same Spirit, varieties of service, the same Lord, varieties of activities, the same God. In other words, all came from the same place. So there's no reason for you kind of to feel a little better than your brother with the gift you have. And oh, by the way, verse 12, the body is one, many members. So, unity. And then when he speaks of, the body parts, and verses 14 through verse 26, that'd be my favorite section of this entire book. And that we emphasized last Sunday morning. And about how each part has its function and each is important. And there's no place for one having superiority over the other in attitude and action. No place for elitism. So how do you behave with all of these gifts? To be sure to get verses 14 through 26 right. And so he ends chapter 12 with, I will show you a still more excellent way, and then the discussion of love. How are we going to get verses 14 through 26 right? We exercise what love is, as he discusses in chapter 13. Now, he starts with the necessity or the essentiality of love in verses 1 through 3. He says, if I speak with the tongues of men and of angels and have not love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. If I give away all that I have, and I deliver up my body to be burned, but have not love, I gain nothing. Now, as you consider these three verses, he first speaks of, if I speak in the tongues of men and of angels. Well, tongue speaking, as you go back to chapter 12, was a miraculous spiritual gift. If you would consider verse 2 with the idea of prophetic powers, and then he says knowledge and faith, and you'd find that each of these would be a miraculous spiritual gift. Not the ordinary knowledge that we gain when we study, not the typical faith that comes by hearing and hearing by the Word of God, but a miraculous type of faith and knowledge that you'd find in chapter 12, verses 8 and 9. So even if you got and possess these miraculous spiritual gifts and you do not love, so what? Well, as he puts it, you're a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. By the way, if you were to take a big old bronze gong, bong, or cymbals. The clash of cymbals. Okay, now, percussionists, there's a certain place and a time where they might fit. Okay, understand that. And I say that so as not to be corrected later. But on the other hand, typically, I'm serious. If we had a gong back here and just in the middle of things, boom, you'd jump out of your seat. And the idea of an echoing cymbal clash is irritating. And so he says, you've got these miraculous spiritual gifts and have not love. It's more like an irritation. It's trouble. Verse 2, prophetic powers, understand all mysteries, all knowledge, faith to remove mountains. Once again, miraculous spiritual gifts. But he says, have not love, I am nothing. Don't throw your shoulders back. Look at me. I've got these gifts. Without love, he says, you're nothing. And then in verse 3, and if I give all that I have. Now, some translations say to the poor. If you notice in the King James Version, that is in italics, meaning those words are not in the Greek text. So if you have a translation like mine, it says, if I give away all I have, that's all that's in the Greek text. If I give my body to be burned, if you would think of almost the ultimate sacrifice, if you would say what two deaths would be the most excruciating imaginable, first, we would probably say, well, crucifixion's on that list. But I want to tell you something. Your body burning to death, that's got to be way up on that list too. If you're going to say, okay, here, I'm going to choose how I want to die, I guarantee you that's going to be either next to last or last on the list. You know the pain that there would be, the torture that would come. Give my body to be burned. But then it says, but have not love, I gain nothing. Can you imagine a man who has sacrificed his life, being burned to death, waking up on the other side of eternity, and he's gained nothing? So here we see the essentiality, the necessity of faith. Paul shared something with me Wednesday night, that love is more important than anything we say, verse 1, anything we have, verse 2, and anything we do, verse 3. Sums it up pretty good, doesn't it? Now, I'm not against people saying, I love you. In fact, I don't think there's a person here who would say, I don't want to hear it. Don't tell me you love me. Listen, I've been married 37 years and I want to keep hearing it from Tish, okay? I know that my dad loved Mom because every once in a while she'd ask him, Chester, do you love me? He'd say, yes, I love you. We want to hear it. But I think there's some people that say, well, I'd rather see it than hear it. Okay, you still want to hear it. But there is a reality. If you hear it and the words don't match the actions don't match the words, it really doesn't mean anything, does it? There was and this goes back probably 20 years ago, if not more. There was a group called Extreme. I've used this illustration before. And they had a song out called More Than Words. And it was really a pretty song. And the whole idea behind that whole song is, you show your love to somebody. You treat them as if you love them. And you know what? Love is more than words. This word love that he uses here, it is the agape word. That word for God's love that's translated in the Septuagint, agape. It would be that highest love. But here it's a love I'm to have. It's not just the love that God has, it's a love I'm to have. And it's a love that's, it's actions. It's not just words or feelings. It's like I've decided to love and I've decided my love's going to act this way. Now, I want to bring you back to the context once again. As we go through and look at these characteristics of love, I want you to be thinking in terms of the context where it's found. You see, we think of love, and a lot of times we think, he loves her, she loves him, they're going to get married. They've had their 50th wedding anniversary. They love each other. Oh, that baby is born and you hold it and it's instant love. That grandbaby's born, it's instant love. You know, we kind of think that way so many times about love. But I want you to think about the context in which you find it. Now, okay, it is speaking about love in the general sense. And here's what love is. But I want you to see it within context. Now, I've heard sometimes people want to kind of discredit James 2 with what James says about faith and works. About faith without works is dead. They say, that's not to do with becoming a Christian. That's to do with a Christian living his life. Well, you know, in James chapter 2, it really is about a Christian living his life. But I'm going to tell you something. He's talking about faith in general. And what he says about faith is true with regards to a faith that leads you to become a Christian or a faith that's to be lived as a Christian. But I hope that when you get to James 2, you see within context that he's talking to Christians about how their faith is to be acted. Well, here, how does it fit in context? The context is, it's not marriage. The context here, it's not your child is born, your grandchild is born. The context is, well, you go back, okay, miraculous spiritual gifts, but what people are involved? Verse 12, for the body is one, it has many members. Verse 14, the body does not consist of one member, but of many. He is talking to the church about their love for the church. He's talking about each member, about their love for every other member. That's the specific context. And so as we look at some of these characteristics of love, what I want you to think in terms of is, I'm serious. Now don't anybody tell who you're thinking of, but I want you to think of somebody. Here's the person I want you to think of. I want you to think of another church member. And I want you to think of that church member that's hardest to get along with. That church member that, for all the good you appreciate in him, there's some things that kind of rub you the wrong way. And you know, I have an idea that everybody here could have somebody in mind that fits that. And then I want you to, as we read these characteristics, you think in terms of, now how does my life present love to the person that's hardest to love? And then number 2, taking it beyond its immediate context to where so many times we want to apply it to our very, very personal relationship, like in our marriage. Then to say, okay, my wife, is this how I'm treating her? My husband, is this how I'm treating him? I don't want us to just see in theory, in abstract, what love is. I want us to be challenged as to how we apply it and live it in our life. And I'll be quite honest with you. If you think of that person that's hardest to love, and if you think about your spouse with everything that you encounter 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and the way you treat her and the things that you say, verses 4 through 7, they become a challenge. So what does he say love is? He first says love is patient. Now, other translations say suffereth long. You mean, I got to suffer. Some relationships might seem that way. But you know what? If it is, you just do. You suffer long, you're patient. You're patient with him. You're patient with her. You know, that means it is not easy. That means it might not always be pleasant. That means they might kind of, get under your skin a little bit. But what do? You're patient. Suffer long. And kind. Kind. Okay. Kind. The words you say. Kind. The way you say the words. Kind. In every action towards that person. You know, as I think about kind, I realize that this passage I'm referring to does not have the word kind in it. And I'm convinced that when Jesus said it, he meant so much more than just being kind. But what I'm thinking about is that golden rule. Whatever you would that men should do to you, do ye even so to them. Or, the way you teach your children, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. And so now, think in terms of kindness. Because I have an idea that at the very root and heart of how you want people to treat you, kindness is a part of it. And so with regards to what I say, do I want somebody to say that to me? The way I say it, do I want somebody to say it that way to me? The way I treat him or her, is that the way I want to be treated? Oh, by the way, remember, we're talking about your fellow Christian that's most difficult to get along with. And we're talking about your spouse. Because I want us to think very specifically. Then he says love. He kind of turns not just the positive, but using this word not, kind of negative. Love does not envy or boast. Love does not envy. In other words, things are good for you, not for me. I can't be happy. Love does not boast. Well, that word boast, I think when you get to the is not arrogant, that next phrase, they kind of go hand in hand. The word boast in Polybius, he uses this phrase that could be translated windbag. And we might consider a boaster somewhat of a windbag. New King James Version says about boast, does not parade itself. Well, we don't really care about the boasting, do we? If you've got to tell somebody how good you are, well, maybe you just need to try to be good. And they'll see it. Love doesn't boast. It's not arrogant. Arrogance is having, now listen, here's what arrogance is. Arrogance is having a exaggerated sense of one's own importance or abilities. Now, there's a place for a study about self-esteem and loving yourself. Why? You know, Jesus said, love others, love your neighbor as you love yourself. We're to love our wives as we love ourselves. There's a place for a healthy self-love, but not arrogance where we've stepped up and we have such a sense of importance that the other person doesn't quite measure up. And that goes at the heart of some of the things said in verses 14 through 26. An arrogance. There it was kind of an elitism. No place for it. You know what's scary about arrogance? I have never ever met a man who said, I'm arrogant. It's probably one of the least recognized character traits in an individual by himself. He doesn't see it. Other people may see it, but we tend not to see it ourselves. And then he said, or rude. You know, rude, it's kind of almost even the opposite how he began with kindness. Love is not rude. Now, this word, translated rude, also occurs in chapter 7, verse 36, where it's translated behaving improperly. Now, there was a specific way the behaving improperly was in chapter 7, verse 36. Here, are you behaving improperly towards your brother? You being rude? What is being rude? It's kind of like, okay, when somebody treats you rude, you know it, don't you? And he says, love's not rude. Then the next, look at this next. It does not insist on its own way. It does not insist on its own way. Don't you like to have your way? If you say no, I don't believe you. We do. But do we always insist on our own way? Somebody says, but that's the right way. But is it more your way still? You know, if you didn't think it was right, you probably wouldn't insist on it. It's similar. Chapter 10, verse 24 says, let no one seek his own good, but his neighbor. Chapter 10, verse 33 says, not seeking my own advantage, but that of many. You know, at the heart of this love is, I'm not the center. You got it? I'm not the center. The boasting, the arrogance, the seeking your own way, it's not about love. In fact, you want to hurt the relationship, you want to destroy the relationship, you boast. You be the arrogant one. You make sure you always get your way. And if you don't, you raise your voice. If you don't, you insult the other. If you don't, you pout. Whatever you do, you see, you've got to get your way. Then next, it says, it is not irritable. Don't some things just frustrate you? They get to you, don't they? But here, love is not irritable. People ever do anything that irritates you? They like that. Well, hopefully, we're not easily irritated. That kind of goes along with the patience, doesn't it? Suffereth long, not irritable. Then it says, or resentful. Now, I have the word resentful. Another translation says, does not count up any wrongdoing. That's, in fact, I have a footnote for that. Greek, irritable, and does not count up wrongdoing. You know, that's kind of like saying, you wronged me. I'm going to record it. Here's the date, here's the time, and here's what you did. You did it again. Here's the date, here's the time, and here's what you did. And it happens again 5 years later. Do you know back on, and you've got the date, you've got the time, and you've got the action. You did this. You got the date, the time, the action. You did that. And you keep bringing it back up. Now, I want to tell you something. Our memories are great, except for when we want them to be. You know, we really want to remember something. Hey, I'm going to probably forget it. But you know, the things we need to forget too many times, that's what we remember. Does not count up wrongdoing. It's almost like saying, no, you need to forget about it. Okay. Your mind doesn't really just work like that. But you can be sure that you do your best for it not to become the breach in your relationship. That you do your best that when, okay, Things go south again. You don't kind of pull up this, fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice. No, I got that wrong. Fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. You don't pull that up. He says, do not rejoice at wrongdoing. Does not rejoice at wrongdoing. You don't like him so much. Things don't go well for him. He does something wrong, and he reaps the consequences. And you're kind of like, I told you so. No. That's not love. It says, but rejoices with the truth. Rejoices with the truth. Truth and honesty should be a part of love. How many of you have seen the movie? I know you have. Why? Because 1,000 of them have been made. Where the man or the woman doesn't tell the truth. And they're just about to get engaged or get married. And then one finds out then they didn't tell the truth. How can I trust you when you lied to me? And they break it off. You've seen the movie. You can say 1,000 of them have been made. Rejoices with the truth. See, we recognize the importance of truth. Oh, by the way, don't let there be smoke screens. You know what I mean by a smoke screen? You don't tell an out and out lie, but you're really not honest. You don't tell an out and out lie, but you really fudge on the truth. You don't tell an out and out lie because maybe you're telling the 10% of truth when really the 90% that you're leaving out is really the heart of the matter. And people do it, don't they? Rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things. The base meaning of this word is to cover. Love bears all things. That's almost like saying, you know, it might have been tough, but I covered it up, went ahead and forgave, and moved on. Bears all things, believes all things. This is the optimistic side of love. Do you really believe the best in this person? Hopes all things. Okay, remember now, once again, we're talking about the person you have the hardest time getting along with. Who is your brother? Who is your sister? That's the context here of 1 Corinthians 12, 13, and 14. Now, towards that one will you bear all things, believe all things, hope all things. Now, as we make that usual application, husband or wife, will you have that positive nature of love, of bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things. And then he ends with endures all things. You know, he started out almost like he ended. When he said love is patient, or love suffereth long. And now he ends with love endures all things. For the sake of my brother, for his good, I practice this love that's spoken of in these verses. And this is the way I aim to treat him. And I'm going to do my best to exercise love towards him. You know, as we realize, it starts out, 1 Corinthians 1 verse 10, about division, and he speaks then of unity. And as you see, there's that kind of is a part of the first 3 chapters. You get over, especially then, to chapters kind of 8 through 10, and the eating of meats. You see that importance of the brother. And then you get here to chapter 12. You know, if love towards the brother had always been exercised at Corinth, just the way he describes it, would there have been a report from the household of Chloe that there's divisions among you? Probably not. Now that ends the importance of love and the description of love. And then as you get back to verse 8, he's kind of moving towards, once again, these miraculous spiritual gifts. He said, love never ends. As for prophecies, they will pass away. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will pass away. He's speaking here of these miraculous spiritual gifts coming to an end. Then he goes on to say, for we know in part and we prophesy in part. God's truth was being given piecemeal, not all at once, but as it were part by part. And then he says, but when... Now, this has been translated a number of ways. The King James, which is very good here, I believe, very, very good. That which is perfect is come. English Standard is good. It says, the perfect comes. One of the best translations is not a standard translation. Bible in Basic English, it says, when the complete comes, because this word complete, it better expresses really than perfect. Because prior, it's all in part, impartial. When the complete, that is, God's truth was being given piecemeal, part by part, piece by piece. And then when it's complete, I think he's talking about that which is perfect, or the perfect, or the complete. That completed and final Word of God. Then the partial will pass away. That is, that which was giving you truth in part, piecemeal, these miraculous spiritual gifts. He's speaking here of the ending, the cessation of the miraculous spiritual gifts. Now I know sometimes people go to this and they say perfect, and they say the only one perfect is Jesus, so this is talking about when Jesus comes again. You know, one thing, as I mentioned, King James Version says that which is perfect is come. It does not say he who is perfect is come. It is neuter. It's not masculine. It's not Jesus. One translation says when perfection comes. That's a little kind of, I think, skewing. It's not as clear. The perfect is come, that which is perfect, or the complete. God's Word completely given. No need then for these miraculous spiritual gifts. And they cease. Just to skip now the last verse, running out of time. So now faith, hope, and love abide. These three. The greatest of these is love. One person put it this way: faith will be lost one day in sight, and hope, it will be realized, but love will persist forever. It is truly a great chapter about love, isn't it? But again, remember the context. It's in the midst of the body is one and has many members. And how are you going to have this unity in spite of these different gifts each person has? You're going to achieve it when you really love each other. And like I said, sometimes we apply this to that greatest love in our life, in this life, our spouse. Okay now, is this the way you're treating him? Is this the way you're treating her? You need to go home and say, I'm sorry. I haven't really treated you like a 1 Corinthians love. And I want to do better. If we could assist you in your obedience tonight, if the need for baptism, if there's need for prayer, we would be glad to take the time to assist you in that obedience.